Okay, Chair, we're now live.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this member conduct panel of Charnwood Borough Council, which has been convened to consider determination of a complaint of a breach of the Members' Code of Conduct of Mount Sorrel Parish Council by Councillor Mick Lemon. My name's Adrian Ward. I'm the Monitoring Officer of Charnwood Borough Council, and I will be opening the meeting until the panel elects a chair. Please note that this virtual meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council's website following the meeting. Under the openness of local regulations, people may film or record this meeting, and this is outside the Council's control. However, people wishing to film or record the meeting should do so in a way that does not disrupt the business of the meeting. Also, so that the meeting is not disturbed, could I ask everyone present to please turn off your mobile phones or switch them to silent, and ensure that your environment is distraction free. In addition, please turn off or move smart speakers such as Alexa, Siri, Cortana, etc., as these record conversations and this could be a breach of GDPR. Item 1 on the agenda is the appointment of a chair. As the monitoring officer, I now call for nominations for a chair of the panel.
It's Councillor Roy Rollings here. I'd like to propose that Councillor Tassell is the chair of the panel.
Do we have a seconder?
Yes, this is Councillor Ward. I'd like to second that.
So can we put it to the vote for the voting members of the panel then, please? Councillor Rollings?
Yes, I'm for the motion.
Councillor Ward?
Also for.
And Councillor Tassell?
For.
So I'll hand over to you now, Councillor Tassell, as the chair.
Thank you. I would like to confirm now verbally those present, and I would like to say welcome to this virtual meeting of the member conduct panel for Charnwood Borough Council. As this is a virtual meeting, it will be run slightly different. Members will need to introduce themselves and state their name and confirm that they can hear and see the proceedings. This is important for the purpose of recording, attendance and transparency of the meeting. I will do this by undertaking an alphabetical roll call. I will ask each member to confirm verbally that they are present and that they can see and hear the proceedings. And I will start with Councillor Jones.
Hello, I am present, Councillor Jones, and I can see and hear proceedings.
Councillor Rollings.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rollings here. I can confirm I can see and hear proceedings.
And myself, I can both see and hear the proceedings. And Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm present and I confirm I can see and hear the proceedings.
And I'm going to ask each officer who is in attendance to confirm verbally that they are present and that they can see and hear the proceedings. So we'll start with Adrian Ward, who is the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. I'm present and can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. David Gill, who is the investigating officer.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Gordon Grimes, who is the independent person.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear the proceedings. Thank you.
Matt Goodyer, who is the Information Development Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can both see and hear the proceedings.
Karen Widdowson, Democratic Services Manager.
Thank you, Chair. I can both see and hear proceedings. Thank you.
Nikki Conway, the Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, Chair. I can both see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. We'll go on to item 2 of the agenda, which is apologies. There have been no apologies received. The panel requires all 3 voting members to be present to be quorate. Item 3, disclosures of pecuniary and personal interests. This is for the members, please. Do you have anything to disclose? Can you please say? Thank you. The chairman's introductory statement, we're on now. I am Councillor Joan Tassell, the appointed chair of this member conduct panel. The other member conduct panel members are Councillor Jones, Councillor Rolling, Councillor Ward. And as the complaint being considered by a parish councillor, Councillor Jones, who is a non-voting parish council representative, is also present. The panel requires 3 voting members to be present to proceed, and therefore we are able to hold the hearing today. The panel has been convened to consider the determination of a complaint of a breach of members' code of conduct of Mount Sorrel Parish Council by Councillor Mick Lemon. We are not aware of any interests or other reasons which could prejudice our ability to hold a fair hearing and make a sound determination of the matter. If any person in this meeting is aware of any reason why they believe that a member of the panel should not take part in this hearing, that person should now state that. No objections from anyone? Councillor Lemon is unable to participate in this meeting, but he has submitted additional information, some of which part is exempt.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, because the information submitted by Councillor Lemon came in late, we haven't yet published it, but the non-exempt part of the information he submitted will be published with the minutes and conclusions of the panel. I understand it was circulated to panel members yesterday, so I hope you've had time to read it and consider it, but if you haven't, I suggest that you may wish to give a pause of a couple of minutes to allow any panel members who haven't yet had opportunity to read it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Give you a couple of minutes then, please. I would like to confirm that the panel are happy to proceed on this basis. And would you please speak your name and your affirmation that you are happy to proceed? Starting with Councillor Jones.
Yeah, Councillor Jones, happy to proceed.
Councillor Rolling.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rolling's here. I'm happy to proceed.
And myself, Councillor Tassell, I'm happy to proceed. And Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ward, I'm also happy to proceed.
I shall now outline the procedure which we will follow today. This is not a court, and therefore evidence will not be given under oath. But I shall remind all parties that the panel is quasi-judicial and that the principles of natural justice will be applied. The investigating officer have indicated they do not wish to call witnesses. The panel will reach its decision on a basis of the balance of probabilities. All comments and questions should be put through to me as chair. The other 3 panel members and I may ask questions at any time of any person in order to clarify any matter. Members will use the raise hand feature in the participant section of the Zoom software if they wish to speak. I have and will exercise the right to intervene and interrupt any person if that person is providing evidence that is not relevant to the proceedings. If any person behaves in an unruly, abusive and disruptive manner, I shall exercise my rights as chair to have that person removed from the virtual meeting. If panel members of the investigating officer or independent persons wishes to refer to the additional information provided by the complainant, please notify the monitoring officer so the hearing can go into an exempt session. The order in which the panel will proceed is as follows. The investigating officer, Mr. Gill, will present his report. Panel members may then ask questions of the investigating officer. The panel will then ask the views of the independent person, Mr. Grimes, and the investigating officer will sum up. The panel will then withdraw from the virtual meeting to determine its view of the facts and whether a breach of members' conduct of Mount Sorrel Parish Council has occurred. We will be accompanied by the monitoring officer and the officer keeping notes of the proceedings. The panel will then return to the virtual meeting and I will announce the panel's decision. If the panel finds that there has been a breach of the Code of Conduct, the panel may seek other views regarding sanctions before withdrawing to consider what sanctions should be recommended. If the panel finds that there hasn't been a breach of the code, then no sanctions will be recommended. The panel will announce its decisions today. The decision and reasons will be recorded in the form of the minutes of the meeting, which will be issued within 10 working days of the end of this hearing. In the event that we find there has been a breach of the code, Councillor Lemon has the right to appeal, which can be exercised within 10 working days of the date of the publication of the panel's decision. Is everyone clear regarding this procedure? Thank you. Before considering the complaint, the panel will decide whether the press should be excluded. There is a presumption that the hearing will be held in public, but I will ask the monitoring officer to advise on this matter.
Thank you, Chair. During the pre-hearing process, neither the investigating officer nor Councillor Lemon gave any indication that they believed any of the matters being considered should be dealt with in confidential or exempt session. However, Councillor Lemon's late submission of yesterday, which consists of a set of minutes of a meeting of Mount Sorrel Parish Council, does include a section where the Parish Council went into their own confidential session. So I would advise members of the panel that if there are any issues they wish to raise relating to that particular part of the submission by Councillor Lemon, that they should let myself or you know in advance, so we then can consider whether or not we need to go into exempt session to deal with those particular issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we all understand that? Thank you. Right, we're going to the determination of complaint. I'm going to ask the investigating officer, Mr. Gill, to present his report. Thank you, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to everybody. I'm going to present my report on the basis that you've all had the opportunity of reading it in advance, so I don't intend to go through it line by line. In section 1 of the report on page 10, it sets out at 1.3 in the executive summary findings that whilst I'm of the view that Councillor Lemon didn't breach the code in respect of the calling of the motion, because he had an interest, the calling of the motion didn't accord with the principles, the Nolan principles, particularly Principle 2. If I take you further down the report, members, to page, bear with me one moment, page 15, starting at paragraph 9.1, Councillor Lemon should have been aware that in calling the meeting, it was likely to provoke concern. And you will see in 9.1, the question that I asked myself was whether, in fact, the decision to submit the motion at the time was a result of political naivety or a bullish indifference to what other people may think or say. Councillor Lemon had been a member of the Parish Council since 1991. He's undergone training on a number of occasions in the Code of Conduct, although I wasn't able to ascertain those training records. And he said that the training had been under a number of iterations of the Code of Conduct and the Standards regime. The Nolan principles are incorporated into the current adopted Code of Conduct, and Principle 2 relates to integrity, and it requires that councillors should not act or take decisions in order to gain financial or other material benefits for themselves, and that they must declare and resolve any interest in relationships. And the wider principle applies to all actions taken by councillors when they're acting in that capacity. As I said in 9.4, when interviewed, Councillor Lemon appeared to lack any awareness or have regard to how a member of the public or any other person looking on would or could have perceived the situation, where we have a member that has declared a disclosable pecuniary interest who's calling a meeting which would or could appear to have a direct financial benefit to that member, in the sense that the running of the Memorial Centre had a direct link into Councillor Lemon's financial status, because he was a supplier and had an income from that. My view was that it should have been obvious to him, particularly given the situation within the Parish Council at that time, which was in some sense dysfunctional. My view was that he was astute enough to realise that he couldn't speak or vote on the motion that he submitted without a dispensation, which leads to the question, you know, what would a man on the Clapham Omnibus think if he was looking on and saw a councillor with a DPI moving a motion and then asking for a dispensation? 9.5 sets out what Councillor Lemon's justification was, and he was concerned that the Memorial Centre was being poorly managed with no clear business plan, and its financial viability was in question. If the Parish Council's financial viability was in question, and the worst case scenario was that it was to close or not be able to function in the manner that it was designed, that would have had a direct financial impact on Councillor Lemon, because he wouldn't be continuing to supply drinks and sundries to the premises. He said that he made no profit on the drinks he supplies, and repeatedly stated in an interview that he was doing what he thought was best for the parish, and it didn't matter what they did, that is the Parish Council, people would be unhappy. Given that he was well aware of the atmosphere surrounding the Parish Council and the interest of the public, it's my view that he should have stepped away from the matter and not submitted the motion, and not sought a dispensation which enabled him to be in attendance at that meeting. Whilst I appreciate that he didn't vote on the matter, he did attend the meeting and express his views. And his views, it would be difficult to separate his views on the future of the Memorial Centre and the impact that might or may have on his business dealings with the parish. I'd say I do think that Councillor Lemon took the view that he really didn't care what people thought. He thought that he had something to add to the debate about the Memorial Centre, and he wanted to make sure that he gave that input, whatever other considerations there might have been. And it's my view that, having looked at the situation in the round, and not as somebody who was on the council or even within the parish, it does look like there was an appearance of bias in the way that it was conducted, where he was the centre of the debate. He moved motions and amendments in that meeting, and was likely to be a beneficiary of the decisions being made. I think, Chair, that briefly sums up my findings. And so, unless members want me to go to any particular part of my report, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. I'm going to open it up now to the members to ask, have you got any questions of Mr. Gill? If you have, please raise the blue hand. I have Councillor Rollins.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to documents that were sent to the panel this morning, some of which are exempt. So I'm not sure whether I can ask it or whether we need to move into an exempt session to reference what was sent to us this morning.
Councillor Rawlings, is the question you're intending to ask about the detailed contents of the minutes, or about the governance and processes that may have been followed?
It's more about whether or not that people proposing and seconding what happened during that meeting would impact on the investigating officer's reports and conclusions or not.
I think as long as you don't refer to any of the detail within the minutes themselves, it sounds to me like that question is appropriate to be asked in public session, but I will intervene if I think we are straying into something that's
fine. Thank you. So the question I have then is, would the person proposing or seconding a motion during that extraordinary meeting, if that person was somebody with an interest in what was being discussed, would that affect the investigating officer's conclusions in the report? Because I do know at 7.8 in the report, it does say that Councillor Lemon stated he never moved or seconded an item and never voted on it because that was the advice of the clerk. So I just wonder if that wasn't the case, whether the conclusion would be any different to what we've got before us, because I'm conscious the investigating officer probably didn't have sight of the documents that were provided to the panel this morning.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlings. That section of the report actually relates to a matter which was determined that Councillor Lemon was entitled to rely on the advice given to him by the clerk, and that was in respect of the accounts. So at that point, Councillor Lemon declared an interest on the accounts. There is some suggestion. There was some suggestion that he moved and seconded the accounts. He says not, and I have no reason to disbelieve that. I think, as I've said in my report, that was down to administration of the meeting, because effectively the item came on. He declared an interest. He states there was no opportunity to get up and leave the room because the item was dealt with very quickly. And I did give some advice in my report as to how that matter could be resolved. Going slightly back to I think the wider question. I know you've referred to the documents that we received, which a part of which is exempt. The fundamental issue for me in respect of that meeting is that Councillor Lemon had an interest. He'd got a declared interest, and under the legislation, he's not allowed to be present in the room. He's not allowed to be present or vote on the matter, and he was granted a dispensation. And it was quite clear to Councillor Lemon that he couldn't be there unless he asked for that dispensation. And my view is that he should have taken a wider look at what he was doing so that he could, he was aware he shouldn't be there. What was the need for the dispensation? And that again is a slightly separate matter, because I'm not satisfied that the dispensation was granted correctly. But when you're looking at in the round, there are specific parts of the code where you can determine an actual breach, for instance, failing to declare the DPI. But when you're looking at the Nolan principles, you're looking at the wider picture. And the wider picture is, in my opinion, he knew, and therefore he shouldn't have been there. He could have made alternative arrangements for those questions or points to be asked. No problem with him calling the meeting, but he could have asked another member to ask the questions that he wanted to be asked of the meeting, or to move the amendments for him, and there was no requirement for him to be in the room. But because of the dispensation, I wasn't able to address that any further.
Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions? Right, okay, then we will now go on to ask Mr. Grimes, the independent person, to give us his views. Please, Mr. Grimes.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Yes, I having excuse me, having received the report and having gone through the entire report, I would certainly firstly say that I would agree with all of the findings in the report, having looked through. Similarly to what Mr. Gill has said, I have also highlighted the same types of issues that Mr. Gill has just talked to. In the role of independent person, Mr. Gill talked at paragraph 9.4 on page 16 about what would the man or the person on the Clapham omnibus think if he was looking on. Now, the role of the independent person, whilst I've never been on the Clapham omnibus, it is certainly to perhaps look at things in the same light that the eponymous person would do so. So basically, how would this appear to a member of the public? And as Mr. Gill has set out in his report, it is very much my view that this would not appear very good in the eyes of somebody in the general public. So I would certainly really echo the points that Mr. Gill has already said. And I also feel that it should have been pretty apparent to Councillor Lemon that his actions would actually be perceived in that way. As was stated before, Councillor Lemon is an experienced councillor, and I think actually coming to the heart of these is the statement really that although Councillor Lemon repeatedly said in interview he was doing what he thought was best for the parish, he goes on to say it didn't matter what they did, parish council people would be unhappy. And he also gives the general impression throughout that it doesn't really impact on him at all as to what people thought. And I certainly feel that would certainly indicate a complete negligence around how the Nolan principles will actually impact on the general public, and also adhering to the Nolan principles. I think it could also be said that would perhaps show a bit of arrogance around adherence to the Nolan principles as well. So really, in conclusion, I would support everything that's in the report, and as Mr. Gill has highlighted, I would also seek to highlight those same points as being at the heart of this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. I would now like to ask the investigating officer, Mr. Gill, to sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Given what Mr. Grimes has just said in my previous comments, in reality, I don't think there's much more that I can add to what's already been said. Councillor Lemon, experienced councillor, should have been aware it would appear that he was aware. It would appear that he was indifferent to the fact that what he was doing was likely to provoke some concern, and he just continued on with it regardless. So unless there's any further questions, Chair, I think that's my summing up.
Thank you very much. Any questions at all? Right, we're now going to withdraw. The panel are now going to withdraw to determine if there has been a breach of the code of conduct. So we are now going to go into the breakout room.
I will now share the adjournment slides. Thank you.
We are now back from discussing the implications of the report we've heard this morning. And I would like to make the following statement as chairman of this panel. Having considered the papers before the panel today, we have unanimously agreed that there has been a breach of 1.2 of the Nolan Principles, which Mount Sorrel Parish Council have adopted as part of their Code of Conduct. Councillor Lemon has declared pecuniary interest, and despite this, he has participated in discussions at meetings and indeed called meetings to discuss the very issues he has financial interests in. The panel's view is that the average person looking at the circumstances would consider Councillor Lemon to have acted with a lack of integrity. Councillor Lemon has been a councillor since 1991 and has undergone training in relation to the Code of Conduct. He ought to have known discussing the matter at public meetings will bring into question his integrity, given 1.2 of the Nolan Principles specifically states they should not act or take decisions in order to gain financial or material benefits. The panel considers there has therefore been a breach of the Mount Sorrel Parish Council's Code of Conduct, given the breach of 1.2 of the Nolan Principles. Thank you.
Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I would now like to go on to the procedures that we do in the case of a breach. And the first one is to ask the investigating officer and independent persons if they have any views regarding sanctions. So I will start with Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you, Chair. Given the nature of the breach and the potential implications, my view would be certainly that there be a letter of censure to Councillor Lemon, but also more importantly, there be a requirement that he undertake further training in the Code of Conduct, and that training is to be dealt with by somebody outside of the parish council, so an independent person to give him an insight into what the code means, and obviously also that training should be recorded so that it's on his record.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Mr. Grimes.
Yes, once again, I totally agree with what Mr. Gill has just said in terms of, in view of this breach, censure, and also the requirement for training. I don't know if this is appropriate at this stage, but I would also see that there possibly needs to be some wider consideration given to governance within the Mount Sorrel Parish Council.
Right, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. We're going to withdraw again to the breakout room to deliberate on sanctions. Thank you. Hello again. The panel is reconvening to announce its decision regarding whether to recommend sanctions. And I would like to read out the following decisions that we have come to. The panel has considered the comments of the investigator and the independent person. The panel recommends the following to Mount Sorrel Parish Council. A formal letter is sent to Councillor Lemon setting out the breach of the code which has been identified by the panel. Councillor Lemon is censured by Mount Sorrel Parish Council, and Councillor Lemon attends independent training in relation to the code of conduct, which is recorded. So I'll go through those again. Item 1 is that we send a formal letter to Councillor Lemon setting out the breach of the code of conduct, which has been identified by this panel. Number 2, Councillor Lemon is censured by Mount Sorrel Parish Council. And number 3, Councillor Lemon attends independent training in relation to the code of conduct, which is recorded. Also, in order to maintain high standards of conduct, the panel further recommends to Mount Sorrel Parish Council that independent training be undertaken by all councillors and officers. It is clear there are fundamental misunderstandings in relation to disclosures of interest. We note the recommendations in the draft governance review and fully endorse the recommendations We note the recommendations of the draft governance review and fully endorse the recommendations suggesting additional training is necessary. The panel would also strongly encourage Mount Sorrel Parish Council to implement the recommendations contained in their governance review as soon as possible. Thank you. Now, I would like to confirm that Councillor Lemon has the right to appeal, and this must be exercised within 10 working days of the date of the publication of the panel's decision. So, and then the next thing is consider any recommendations that the panel wishes to make to promote and maintain high standards of conduct, which is, I think, is what we've covered at the end of the that piece that I've just read out. Anyone got any answer, any questions, any comments? And therefore,